Okay, so we've covered 4 top trends, right? Now, inflation, which affects all of us ordinary people, not people like you who are price insensitive. So just let's have a look at the global inflation trend right now. It's at the moment at a multi-decade low, right? It's down to 3.3%. And how is that affecting India? India is also being impacted by the global decline in inflation. Look at that. India's inflation is falling. It's down to around about 5% now, which again would be great news. We say we are doing so well, but guess what? It's still higher than many other emerging markets. Between 1980 and for 20 years, 2 decades till 2000, out of 150 emerging markets, India was 55th in inflation terms. In other words, there were almost 100 countries who had higher inflation or worse inflation than us. Then 2000 to 2010, India was about halfway. Half the countries were had a better inflation, lower inflation than us, and half the countries had worse inflation. Then 2010 to 2013, we were really highest inflation, almost as among very near the bottom of the pile, top of the pile, worst inflation. Out of 150 countries, we had almost the highest, 140th. And what's surprising from your data, Ruchir, is that we're still only at 110, even at 5%. We think, man, great, we've controlled inflation, but others have controlled it better.
Yeah, no, I think we must celebrate the fact that we have lower inflation out here because, as you said, higher prices is something which really hurts people. So I think that's something which there's a lot to be gloomy about in the global economy today, but that's something which is good for India. But be very aware that this problem is far from being solved, that this is something which is happening because globally prices are falling very sharply. Out here, I think that the RBI governor has done a relatively good job in terms of anchoring inflationary expectations, but there's still a lot of work to be done. That if by any chance globally inflation starts to rise again, what will happen to our inflation trend? If it starts to go back up to 7 to 8% at some point in time, that's obviously not good news. So I think that this really puts it in perspective that the decline in inflation in India of late has really been a lot because of the collapse in global commodity prices.
You know, there are 2 things in your data then. I want to make sure I've worked very hard on this data because it's all his data, nothing to do with me. I wish that was my data. But the 2 things which you always say, one is India is not in isolation anymore. Everything is affected globally. We think we are big enough and unique enough, but global inflation is falling. We are falling with that, number 1. Number 2, you've got to look at yourself relative to other countries.
Yeah.
Both those come out there. Globally, we are impacted, and relatively, others could be doing better. So we're not doing that well relatively. We're 110th out of 150.
Yeah.
That's not very good.
Yeah, but
it's still better than
it's better
high inflation.
Yeah, than when we used to be also. So I'd say that there's some progress on that, and incrementally that's a bit of a positive. But a lot of work needs to be done before we can say that this beast has been slayed.
Right. Now, on our 6th trend, everybody in India is worried about the Fed raising their rates again. When even they whisper it, the markets here collapse, everybody gets into jitter. That's because they feel the money will go from India to the United States.